Dear friends, it's hearty and warm welcome once again. Friends, in this our today's lecture, we are going to start the study of another topics, and we shall study the three different topics. First of all, we are going to study about the important terms related with the act of respiration, that is terminology. Then we are going to study about a very little concept, that is carbon monoxide poisoning, and then about the control or regulation of respiration. So quickly, let us start the study of different important terms. First term, what we people have to study is tidal volume. Tidal volume means it is the volume of air that is inhaled or exhaled during normal breathing. We know that inhalation means to take pure air into the body from surrounding, that is inhalation, and exhalation, that is expiration, means outletting of foul air outside the body. Now whenever the normal breathing is carried out, effortless breathing is carried out, at that time whatever volume of air is inspired and expired is simply known as tidal volume. And in normal adult human being, this tidal volume is about 500 ml, that is half liter. एफर्टलेस ब्रीदिंग असं मी म्हटलं, नॉर्मल ब्रीदिंग याचा अर्थ सर्वसाधारण ज्या वेळेला आपण श्वासोच्छवास करत असतो त्यावेळेला जितकी एअर, द व्हॉल्यूम ऑफ एअर इनहेल आणि एक्सहेल केली जाते तिला म्हटलं जातं टायडल व्हॉल्यूम. कम टू द सेकंड टर्म, दॅट इज इन्स्पायरेटरी रिझर्व व्हॉल्यूम. इट इज the maximum volume of air that is inhaled during forced inspiration. I am going to repeat. I said that inspiratory reserve volume means it is the maximum volume of air that is inhaled during forced inspiration, and it is near about 2000 to 2500 ml. 2000 to 2500 ml. Please try to notice the difference between tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. Come to the next, that is expiratory reserve volume. Expiratory reserve volume. Just now we have studied about the definition of inspiratory reserve volume, and I told you that inspiratory reserve volume, it is the maximum volume of air that is inhaled during forced inspiration. Now here the expiratory reserve volume means it is the maximum volume of air that is exhaled during forceful expiration, and it is near about 1000 to 1100 ml. Come to the next term, fourth, dead space. Dead space, it is the volume of air present in the respiratory tract. You know that respiratory tract, it includes the nasal passages, pharynx, trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and the terminal end of bronchial tree, that is bronchioles. So whatever volume of air present in this respiratory tract, that is from nasal passages up to the terminal bronchiole, is known as dead space. Respiratory tract मध्ये असलेली जी हवा आहे, एकूण जी एअर आहे तिला म्हटलं जातं डेड स्पेस, अँड दिस एअर प्रेझेंट इन द रेस्पिरेटरी ट्रॅक्ट does not take part in the gaseous exchange. Okay, and it is about 150 ml. 150 ml. Come to the next term, residual volume. Residual, it is the volume of air present in the lungs as well as in the dead space after forceful expiration. Forceful expiration केल्यानंतर, maximum forceful expiration, exhalation केल्यानंतर सुद्धा the volume of air, जितकी हवा ही lungs मध्ये आणि dead space मध्ये शिल्लक राहते, तिला म्हटलं जातं residual volume. And this residual volume is about 1100 to 1200 ml. Come to the next term, total lung capacity. Total lung capacity. Let me explain you. Total lung capacity means it is the volume of air that lungs can hold after maximum and forceful inspiration. It is the volume of air which can be held by lungs after maximum and forced inspiration. Forced जास्तीत जास्त हवा आत घेऊन जितकी एअर, द व्हॉल्यूम ऑफ एअर लंग्स ही होल्ड करून ठेवू शकते, याला म्हटलं जातं टोटल लंग कॅपॅसिटी. अँड व्हेरी अमेझिंग टू नो, इट इज अबाउट 5200 to 5800 ml. It means one can hold the air more than 5 liters. Approximately 6 liters of air can be held within our lungs. Okay. Come to the next term, 7th, that is vital capacity. Vital capacity. Vital capacity is defined as it is the maximum volume of air that can be exhaled after maximum inspiration. Vital capacity, it is the volume of air which can be exhaled after maximum inspiration. Maximum inspiration केल्यानंतर जितकी एअर आपण एक्सहेल करू शकतो इला म्हटलं जातं व्हायटल कॅपॅसिटी. अँड द व्हायटल कॅपॅसिटी इज नियर अबाउट 4100 to 4600 ml. So here we have studied some of the important terms: tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, dead space, residual volume, total lung capacity and vital capacity. Now let us talk about another little concept, that is carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide poisoning. All of we are known that hemoglobin, red colored iron containing respiratory pigment present in the RBC, is mainly responsible for the transportation of oxygen as well as up to certain extent the transportation of carbon dioxide. Now the hemoglobin has affinity towards oxygen, no doubt, but on the other hand one should know that hemoglobin has great affinity for carbon monoxide than oxygen also. Let me tell you that hemoglobin has about 250 times more affinity for carbon monoxide than the oxygen. आपल्या सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे, जसं आता मी म्हटलं की हिमोग्लोबिन आरबीसी मध्ये असलेला हा मॉलिक्यूल प्रामुख्याने आपल्या शरीरामध्ये ऑक्सिजन आणि कार्बन डायऑक्साइडची वाहतूक करत असतो. आणि हिमोग्लोबिनला ऑक्सिजन बरोबर अफिनिटी आहेच, आणि त्यामुळे ज्या वेळेला हिमोग्लोबिन आणि ऑक्सिजन जवळ येतात, देयर इज अ फॉर्मेशन ऑफ ऑक्सीहिमोग्लोबिन, isn't it? And this ऑक्सीहिमोग्लोबिन dissociates again to form hemoglobin and oxygen. But I said, मी आता असं म्हटलं की हिमोग्लोबिनला कार्बन मोनॉक्साइड बाबत ऑक्सिजन पेक्षा जवळपास 250 टाइम्स जास्त अफिनिटी आहे. And that's why in presence of carbon monoxide the hemoglobin readily combines with carbon monoxide to form carboxyhemoglobin. And carboxyhemoglobin is irreversible compound. It is very stable compound. It means this carboxyhemoglobin once get formed, its dissociation is not possible. The carbon monoxide and hemoglobin, they cannot be separated from each other. हा कार्बॉक्झीहिमोग्लोबिन हा अत्यंत स्टेबल कंपाऊंड आहे. एकदा कार्बॉक्झीहिमोग्लोबिन तयार झाला की ते एकमेकांपासून सेपरेट होत नाही. And thus the hemoglobin molecule that loses its ability again to bind with the oxygen, and ultimately it cannot bring about the transportation of oxygen. Why this is so? Now that hemoglobin is blocked by carbon monoxide, and as the hemoglobin get blocked by carbon monoxide, it cannot perform the oxygen transportation. Sufficient oxygen cannot be carried up to the body cells, and thus the body cells are starved with oxygen. जर या ठिकाणी हिमोग्लोबिन कार्बन मोनॉक्साइड मुळे ब्लॉक झाला तर पर्यायाने त्याची ऑक्सिजन ट्रान्सपोर्ट करण्याची कॅपॅसिटी संपून जाईल आणि त्यामुळे पर्यायाने सफिशियंट पुरेशा प्रमाणात ऑक्सिजन हा बॉडी सेल्स पर्यंत वाहून नेला जाणार नाही. बॉडी सेल्स रिमेन स्टार्व्ड फॉर ऑक्सिजन. बॉडी सेल्सला ऑक्सिजन मिळणार नाही and ultimately it adversely affect the entire metabolic process. Usually due to the carbon monoxide poisoning, the person has a feeling of nausea, vomiting, giddiness. Of course it is due to the less availability of oxygen to the body cells. आणि ज्या वेळेला आपल्या शरीरातील पेशींना सेल्सला जर पुरेसा ऑक्सिजन मिळाला नाही तर त्या व्यक्तीमध्ये वॉमिटिंग, गिड्डीनेस, ज्याला आपण म्हणतो मळमळणं, चक्कर येणं, किंवा इन सिव्हिअर कंडिशन दॅट पर्सन मे बिकम अनकॉन्शियस. डेथ मे बी पॉसिबल. That's all. And you know this thing happens in closed garages or whenever there is a heavy traffic. This thing oftenly happens. That's all about the carbon monoxide poisoning. Now come to the third topic of our today's lecture, that is the regulation or control of breathing. Regulation or say control of breathing. The act of breathing is controlled by dual mechanism. It means there is a nervous control as well as chemical control. Nervous control in the sense the control by nervous system, brain, and chemical control means the control brought about by different hormones or chemical substances. We people have to study here about the nervous control over the act of breathing. So let us talk about the nervous control. Just as I told you that nervous control means it is the control over the act of breathing by brain, by nervous system. We all are aware that the breathing, normal breathing, steady breathing, or the act of breathing during normal, steady and calm conditions is an involuntary act, isn't it? ज्या वेळेला आपण नॉर्मल कंडिशन मध्ये असतो त्यावेळेला ब्रीदिंग हे इनव्हॉलंटरी ऍक्ट मानली जाते. इनव्हॉलंटरी याचा अर्थ काय? इट इज टू बी कॅरीड आउट नॉट अकॉर्डिंग टू आवर विल. आता इट इज फाउंड दॅट द नॉर्मल adult human being breathe about 12 times per minute. Look, normal adult human being breathe about 12 times per minute, while the young children breathe about 44 times per minute. Now I said that just now that the normal steady breathing is an involuntary act, and this breathing act is controlled by different groups of neurons, different group of nerve cells present in different parts of brain, especially in the medulla oblongata and pons varolii of brain. Let me explain you. नॉर्मल ब्रीदिंग ची जी ऍक्ट आहे, नॉर्मल ब्रीदिंग ची जी प्रक्रिया आहे ती ब्रेनच्या मेडुला ऑब्लॉंगेटा आणि पॉन्स व्हेरोली या दोन भागांमध्ये असणाऱ्या काही ग्रुप्स ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स, न्यूरॉन्स मीन्स नर्व सेल, चेतापेशींचे समूह यांच्या मदतीने नियंत्रित केली जाते. अँड दॅट ग्रुप्स ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स present in the medulla oblongata and pons varolii of brain togetherly known as respiratory centers. Let me explain you. Here I am going to draw a rough and lateral view of brain, because we people have to study about the structure of brain in detail in another chapter. Please look. In lateral view, the human brain, it appears somewhat like this. This major part of the brain is known as the cerebrum. The peripheral part of cerebrum is also known as cerebral cortex. Here I am going to show a small brain, lesser brain, that is nothing but the cerebellum. आपण याला छोटा मेंदू असं म्हणतो, सेरेबेलम, लेसर ब्रेन. सेरेब्रम इज कॉल्ड एज द ग्रेटर ब्रेन, मोठा मेंदू. दिस इज सेरेबेलम. इट इज प्रेजेंट डॉर्सली. देन हियर इज अ प्रेजेंस ऑफ pons varolii, and below that slightly pyramidal part, that is medulla oblongata. Now I said just now, the act of normal breathing is an involuntary act and it is controlled by certain groups of neurons present in the medulla oblongata and pons varolii, which are togetherly known as respiratory centers. Now there are three main respiratory centers which take part to control the act of breathing. Let me tell you. Respiratory center. There are three groups of neurons which represent the respiratory centers. First one is dorsal group of neurons. Dorsal group of neurons. The dorsal group of neurons is present in the dorsal portion of medulla oblongata. Look at the diagram. Here I have shown the medulla oblongata, and this is dorsal part, this is ventral part. So let me show you here with the help of red chalk. Here is the dorsal group of neurons. This group of neurons mainly causes inspiration, means it is mainly responsible to control the act of inhalation, inspiration, and that's why this dorsal group of neurons present in the dorsal region of medulla oblongata is also known as inspiratory center. आता मी असं म्हटलं, ह्या डॉर्सल ग्रुप ऑफ न्यूरॉन जो आहे तो प्रामुख्याने इन्स्पायरेशन घडवून आणतो आणि म्हणून त्याला इन्स्पायरेटरी सेंटर असं म्हणतात. सेकंड, व्हेंट्रल ग्रुप ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स. It is present in the ventrolateral region of medulla oblongata. ventrolateral, that is along the ventral and slightly lateral side of medulla oblongata. Let me show. Consider here with the help of green chalk I have shown the ventral group of neurons. This group of neurons is responsible to send signal for inspiration as well as expiration, and that's why we can say that this ventral group of neurons represent inspiratory as well as expiratory center. Try to understand. याचा अर्थ या ठिकाणी या वेंट्रल ग्रुप ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स मध्ये जे न्यूरॉन्स आहेत, नर्व सेल्स आहेत, चेतापेशी आहेत, त्यापैकी काही न्यूरॉन्स हे इन्स्पायरेशन ह्या ऍक्टला नियंत्रित करतात, म्हणून त्यांना आपण इन्स्पायरेटरी न्यूरॉन्स पण म्हणू शकतो, आणि काही न्यूरॉन्स एक्सपायरेशन कंट्रोल करतात, म्हणून त्यांना आपण एक्सपायरेटरी न्यूरॉन्स पण म्हणू शकतो. थर्ड टाइप, pneumotoxic center. This center is present in the dorsal portion of pons varolii. You know, here I have shown this much part as pons varolii. Dorsal portion of pons varolii. Look at the diagram. Here, pneumotoxic center. And this pneumotoxic center, it sends signal to all the inspiratory neurons of inspiratory center, that is nothing but the dorsal group of neurons, as well as only the inspiratory neurons of ventral group of neurons. व्यवस्थित लक्षात घ्या. हा जो न्यूमोटॉक्सिक सेंटर आहे, हा कोणाला सिग्नल पाठवतो, तर या डॉर्सल ग्रुप ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स जो आहे त्यामधल्या सगळ्या न्यूरॉन्सला, म्हणजेच इन्स्पायरेटरी न्यूरॉन्सला. कारण आपल्याला माहिती आहे की डॉर्सल ग्रुप ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स, दिस ग्रुप कंटेन ओनली इन्स्पायरेटरी न्यूरॉन्स which causes the inspiration, आणि this pneumotoxic center, it also send signal to only inspiratory neurons of ventral group of neurons, not to the expiratory center, not to the expiratory neurons. Its main function is to primarily limit inspiration, to limit inspiration, inhalation of air. म्हणजे inhalation, inspiration या क्रियेवर फक्त नियंत्रण ठेवणं, लिमिट ठेवणं हे त्याचं कार्य आहे. And there is one center known as apneustic center. It is present in the ventral portion of medulla oblongata, and this center were antagonistic to the pneumotoxic center. You know, antagonistic means opposite. The pneumotoxic center and apneustic center are antagonistic in functioning, opposite in their work. Now, we people have to study actual about the mechanism of regulation of breathing, control over the act of breathing. Now let me explain you actual mechanism of control of breathing. I said just now that the act of normal breathing is controlled by these three main centers, such as inspiratory center, that is nothing but the dorsal group of neurons present in the dorsal portion of medulla oblongata, then inspiratory and expiratory center, which is in the form of ventral group of neurons in the ventral portion of medulla oblongata, and also the pneumotoxic center present in the dorsal portion of pons varolii. Actually, the functioning of inspiratory center and this center, that is ventral group of neurons, is influenced, is affected by stretch receptors present in the wall of alveolar sacs as well as the carotid body. Now what does it mean? Carotid body हा वेगळा भाग आहे, त्याला chemoreceptors असं म्हणतात. Actually carotid bodies are located in the carotid arteries which carry blood to the brain. That is another part. But temporarily I want to tell you the functioning of these two centers is influenced, is affected by the chemoreceptors present in the carotid body, and most important, the stretch receptors present in the wall of alveolar sac. Now let me explain you the actual mechanism. I repeatedly told you the normal act, quiet act, steady breathing is controlled by these two centers. Okay? Now, initially, inspiratory center, look at the diagram. Inspiratory center, that is the dorsal group of neurons, it sends signal and thus bring about the contraction of inspiratory muscles. Listen, the inspiratory center, it sends signal and bring about the contraction of inspiratory muscles. Do you remember inspiratory muscles? Inspiratory muscles means the external intercostal muscles present in between the ribs. We have studied in our initial topic. As well as the peripheral muscles of abdominal diaphragm. आपण शिकलेलो आहोत की रिब्सच्या मध्ये असणारे जे एक्सटर्नल इंटरकोस्टल मसल्स आहेत त्यांना आणि आपला जो ॲब्डॉमिनल डायफ्राम आहे त्याच्या पेरिफेरल मसल्सला इन्स्पायरेटरी मसल्स म्हणतात, बिकॉज whenever these inspiratory muscles undergo contraction, they help to increase the overall volume of thoracic cage, which facilitate for the inhalation of air, that is inspiration. And that's why here I said during breathing, initially the inspiratory center, it sends signal to the inspiratory muscles. Inspiratory muscles undergo contraction, due to which the inhalation of air, inspiration takes place. Air enters into the lungs. As the air enters into the lungs and lungs get filled by means of air, alveoli, alveolar sacs get filled by means of the air. There is a stretching, there is expansion of alveolar sacs. Look, consider here is supposed to be the alveolar sac. आता या alveolar sac मध्ये एअर आल्यानंतर डेफिनेटली त्या एक्सपांड होतील, त्यांचं स्ट्रेचिंग होईल, and due to which whatever stretch receptors are present in the wall of, let me write, these are stretch receptors. The stretch receptors present in the wall of alveolar sacs get stimulated, they generate the impulse and they send that impulse to the inspiratory center as well as expiratory center. Look at the diagram. I said that after inhalation of air, as the air is filled into the lungs, into the alveolar sac, the alveolar sac undergoes expansion. It causes the stretching of the wall of alveolar sac. Thus, the receptors present in the wall of alveolar sac get stimulated and they generate impulse. That impulse is sent to the respiratory center, especially inspiratory as well as expiratory center. Receptor याचा अर्थ the group of cells, group of sensory epithelial cells which receive any particular type of stimulus. कुठलीही विशिष्ट संवेदना स्वीकारणाऱ्या स्पेशलाइज्ड ग्रुप ऑफ सेल्सला रिसेप्टर म्हणतात. मग या ठिकाणी स्ट्रेच रिसेप्टर्स याचा अर्थ काय, तर स्ट्रेचिंग, तन्यता ही संवेदना स्वीकारणारे रिसेप्टर्स म्हणून त्यांना म्हटले स्ट्रेच रिसेप्टर्स. मग या स्ट्रेच रिसेप्टर्सने इन्स्पायरेटरी आणि एक्सपायरेटरी सेंटरला संवेदना पाठवली, त्यामुळे द इन्स्पायरेटरी सेंटर बिकम्स इनएक्टिव्ह. पर्यायाने इन्स्पायरेटरी सेंटर इनएक्टिव्ह होतो and expiratory center is induced. As the inspiratory center becomes inactive, no more impulses are sent to the inspiratory muscles. Am I right? जर inspiratory center inactive झाला तर आता inspiratory center करून परत या inspiratory muscles ला संवेदना जाणार नाही, and thus the inspiratory muscles, that is external intercostal muscles and the muscles of abdominal diaphragm, they start relaxation, and as they start relaxation, we know the volume of thoracic cage again slowly decreases and passively it occurs the expiration. पर्यायाने thoracic cage चं व्हॉल्यूम हळूहळू कमी होतं आणि त्यामुळे लंग्स वर प्रेशर निर्माण झाल्यामुळे एक्सपायरेशन, एक्सहेलेशन म्हणजे हवा ही परत बाहेर टाकून दिली जात असते. दिस इज द एक्सपायरेशन. नाउ आफ्टर एक्सपायरेशन, as the alveolar sacs are no longer stretched, therefore the stretch receptors become inactive, or the stretch receptors now does not produce more impulses. They does not fire impulses. They does not generate impulses. अर्थातच या ठिकाणी आता स्ट्रेचिंग होत नाहीये, कारण एक्सहेलेशन झाल्यामुळे एअर ही बाहेर टाकली गेली आहे आणि त्यामुळे हे स्ट्रेच रिसेप्टर्स टेम्पररीली इनॅक्टिव्ह होतात. पर्यायाने त्यांच्याकडून आता इम्पल्स पुन्हा इकडे इन्स्पायरेटरी आणि एक्सपायरेटरी सेंटरला जात नाहीये आणि म्हणून अगेन द इन्स्पायरेटरी सेंटर बिकम्स ऍक्टिव्ह. Again it generates the impulse. That impulse is sent to the inspiratory muscle and again it brings about the contraction of inspiratory muscle and the act of inspiration. In this manner it occurs alternately, the inspiration and expiration, that is nothing but the breathing. This act of normal, steady, quiet inspiration and expiration is also known as hearing and brewer's reflex. Hearing and brewer's reflex. This is all about the steady state of breathing. But during heavy breathing, the inspiratory center, it sends signal to the expiratory center also. It is necessary for forceful inspiration as well as forceful expiration, and this oftenly occurs during the heavy exercise. In addition to that, let me tell you, these respiratory centers, whatever here we have studied, all these respiratory centers are also connected to other centers present in the cerebral cortex. आत्ताच मी तुम्हाला सांगितलं, the peripheral portion of cerebrum is known as cerebral cortex. या cerebral cortex मध्ये जे इतर वेगवेगळे सेंटर्स आहेत, केंद्र आहेत, ते या respiratory centers शी जोडलेले असतात. And that's why one can modify our breathing pattern. आपला breathing pattern आपण स्वइच्छेने पण modify करू शकतो. Say, except normal and steady breathing, we can perform the deep breathing, isn't it? Or we can control our breath during speech. We can control our breath during singing. This is modified breathing than the normal or steady breathing. Or we can hold our breath to prevent the entry of any irritating gas or foul smell. बरोबर आहे? एखादा इरिटेटिंग स्मेल असेल किंवा फाऊल गॅसेस काही असेल तर ते आतमध्ये नाकामधून आतमध्ये इनहेल होऊ नये याच्यासाठी आपण तात्पुरतं आपलं ब्रीथ हे होल्ड पण करू शकतो. बट माइंड वेल, वी कॅनॉट होल्ड आवर ब्रीथ फॉर मोर टाइम. देयर इज अ पर्टिक्युलर लिमिटेशन अँड दॅट्स वाय वन कॅनॉट ब्रिंग द सुसाइड बाय होल्डिंग हिज ओन ब्रीथ, बिकॉज whenever the person tries to hold the breath, it occurs the increase in the level of carbon dioxide in our blood, and this increased level of carbon dioxide in blood, it stimulates for exhalation quickly. Okay, that's all about this topic, that is control of breathing. So let us stop here today. Thank you, all the best.